Hello and welcome to the show. We have all gone through periods in our lives that when we look back on them, we say what the devil meant for bad, God used it for my good. Well, today our guest has a book that she has written. It's an autobiography, and she takes us through some periods of her life where the devil thought he was going to take that bad thing and work it against her, but God made it work for her good. We've got a very exciting show for you today. Stay with us.
He had threatened to kill my mom and myself and my sisters if I ever told, and I believed him at 5.
Nikki Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am excited to have you here. Again, you have written this book, What the Devil Meant for Bad, God Used for My Good. And I want to make sure we give the subtitle as well, Overcoming the Devil's Defeat and Strongholds After 20 Years.
Yes.
Let's talk about what led to the writing of this book.
God actually started giving it to me over 10 years ago. I would wake up in the middle of the night and hear the words and wake up the next morning and not remember what he had said.
Yes.
And then I started jotting it down on a piece of paper next to my bed.
Yeah.
And after that stack of paper, along with some journals from my childhood, became my book. And I started putting it into the computer in 2005 after watching Woman Thou Art Loose by T.D. Jakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's unpack this a little bit more, because what God was doing was bringing back to your remembrance some things that occurred in your childhood. So, again, a 10-year process of documenting this to get to the book process. But let's talk about your childhood. What was your childhood like?
It was interesting, to say the least. I didn't grow up in a traditional family. My mom has 3 daughters, and myself and 2 sisters, who we all have 3 different dads. And then my dad has his set of children. So they got divorced when I was like 1 year old.
Yeah.
So I mostly spent time with my grandmother, who just recently passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a lot of what you talk about in the book is some abuse. And let's start when you were 5 years old. You were sexually molested by your mom's boyfriend.
Yes.
Talk about that process, because you talk about it with so much detail in the book. Let's talk about that and why you felt it was important to include that into the book.
I feel like so many people suffer from being molested as a child, men and women, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it. But because I've forgiven him, I feel free to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it started happening when I was 5 years old. That most vivid memory that I have of it was when my dad brought me home from one of those weekends at my grandmother's house. And he dropped me off, and I was giving him a look saying, really, don't leave me.
Yeah.
But he interpreted that as I just didn't want to go home. And
Yeah.
he was like, well, I'll just see you next weekend. And as soon as he left, I took my bag to my room and dropped it off in the room and ran and hid underneath the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Because I already knew that my mom's boyfriend was going to molest me.
Yeah.
And I was hiding there with my knees up, and I was trying to be as quiet as possible. And he was looking for me, but he was going through the house calling my name as if we were playing a game of hide and seek. And then he started threatening to leave me there by myself. And he had even turned the TV off in the room, in my mother's bedroom. And before I knew it, he swung the cabinet doors open and snatched me from under the cabinet.
You there.
Yeah.
You held on to this. I mean, this occurred numerous times.
Yes.
Every time you guys were alone together, this occurred. And you had to bear this secret alone for over 10 years.
Yeah.
The weight of something like that on a child at 5 years old, growing up, having to carry that secret. How was that? I mean, and I guess why didn't you at some point maybe reveal to someone prior to revealing it to your mom 10 years later?
He had threatened to kill my mom and myself and my sisters if I ever told. And I believed him at 5. So he was, I'm sure, in his late 40s, early 50s.
Yes.
And then he would do intimidating things like stand over my bed in the middle of the night, and I wake up and he's there over the bunk bed. So I believed him. Yeah. So I was afraid to tell her.
Man. And you later learned, and you talk about it in the book, that you later learned that it didn't just happen with you, but it had actually happened with another family member as well.
My oldest sister.
Yeah.
Now, my youngest sister, she was only 3 when I was 5. I'm not sure if it ever happened to her, but I do know my older sister did say that he did it to her as well.
Man.
Yeah.
And you talk about it in some detail in the book, but talk about what led to you finally being able to find the release to be able to tell your mom exactly what occurred.
My mom was accusing me of what old people used to call being fast,
Mm-hmm.
and because boys had started calling the house. So she was assuming that I was having sex, and I wasn't. And that's what made me break down and finally tell her that I'm not doing XYZ because of this person did this to me. And every
Right.
time I even think about being sexually active, it takes me back to what my mom's boyfriend used to do to me.
Right.
So.
So what was your mom's response?
She cried, and she shared with me that it had also happened to her when she was a kid. Her reaction wasn't, I guess, what I was expecting for it to be as a parent, but I guess she did what she knew to do,
Yeah.
which was she consoled me, and that to me was one of the most comforting and real conversations that we've ever had.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did that bring you all closer?
I thought it would have,
Yeah.
but no, our relationship resumed the way that it was before I told her.
Yeah, which was
Yeah.
not being very close
Right.
and not really doing a whole lot of communicating with one another.
Right, exactly.
Do you think that maybe this was a situation where he saw that you guys were not very close and didn't communicate a lot and took advantage of that situation?
From my understanding as a child, I had heard that he had done it before to
Okay.
someone else. So I think he just preyed on her because she did have 3 daughters. And my mom, in her defense, she was young and naive. So I don't think she really knew what to do because she was only 18 when she had me and 16 when she had my older sister. And then my younger sister at 21. So I don't think she really knew what to do as a parent. Yeah.
Well, really, I commend you for getting the courage to be able to tell your mom and share that with her. And then later she dismissed him and got him out of the house and out of your guys' lives. But you even taken it a step further to now write this in a book to be able to encourage and help other people. What would you say to maybe some young person who could be viewing today that may find themselves in a situation that you found yourself in?
I would say definitely talk about it, whether it's with a counselor or a teacher, somebody that you trust. If it's a child, go to your parents, because the quicker you get it out in the air, the better. The healing starts at that time.
Right.
And then Satan can't use that as a stronghold on you anymore once you bring it into the light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk more about your childhood when we come back.
Okay.
More with Nikki Alexander when we come back. Stay with us.
What does success look like? Chris Howell Communications offers complete videography services so that you can connect with your audience in a fresh and personable way. What does success sound like? Capture your audience's attention with professional voiceover narration of your book, online training modules, or corporate telephone greetings and script reading. Tell your organization's story through a professional one-on-one interview. Our award-winning journalists transform ordinary news into compelling announcements. What does success feel like? Bring a little magic to your events. Our facilitators know how to connect with the crowd, and our MC, hosting, and red carpet handling of events are second to none. But that's not all. We are your single source for digital marketing and public relations. We work with film producers, nonprofits, small businesses, and entrepreneurs alike. And we're proud of the excellence our clients have come to rely on. So, how can we help you with your story of success?
Welcome back. We're talking with Nikki Alexander, the author of the book, What the Devil Meant for Bad, God Used for My Good. Nikki has written this book as a source of motivation and encouragement to survivors of mental, physical, and emotional abuse in a very real and transparent way. We've talked about some abuse that you suffered early on as a child, being molested at 5 years old. Now, as we move forward, as a result of this molestation at 5 years old, you later developed an addiction yourself. Let's go into your addiction to First of all, let me say, I commend you for addressing this issue of pornography and the addiction to it, because our society does not talk about women being addicted to pornography like you point out in the book here. Let's talk about how this addiction came about and ultimately what led you to overcome it.
I was hanging out with a friend in 4th grade, and she went up to her mom's room and got the videos from her mom's boyfriend's collection. And she put it in, and from there, the enemy used that to draw me into that.
Yeah.
From then on out, I was 9 years old when I first started watching pornography.
So at 9 years old, it was another young lady that introduced you to pornography.
Yes.
And this became a source of addiction for a number of years.
Yes, it became a plague basically because I'd already had a negative outlook on sex from being molested. So it was just another way for the enemy to use that as a stronghold in my life. And it was so funny because she and I talked about this after we became adults. And she said, I don't understand why it made you feel that way. She, you know, it didn't affect me like that, and I don't watch it anymore. But he used it to plague my mind,
right?
And kept drawing me into it.
Well, I mean, and it's very likely that she hadn't been victimized the way that you had been victimized.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You know, so maybe that it didn't affect her in that way. But for you, even into adulthood, from 9 years old up into your adulthood, and I guess it was very interesting the way you talked about it in the book, to where it really wasn't a sense of pleasure for you,
right?
But somehow it was a distraction for you to just get you outside of the normal environment, but you use it as a sense of stress relief, if you will, is what you stated in the book. Talk about that portion of it, because I was curious as to, it's not pleasurable, but yet I use it as an escape.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I was addicted to it, but it was a sin that I indulged in for many, many years.
Okay.
And it was a stress relief.
Okay.
More so because I wasn't like watching it every day, 12 hours a day, not like that. I never even really made it through a whole video. Once I accomplished what I watched it for, I was done with it. Yeah. Okay,
so let's talk about this because, again, like you pointed out, at the time you were introduced to this, yes, you had to go to a store and you had to get the brown bag and disclose it and that type of thing. Now, something that's really at your fingertips. How do you overcome a stronghold and the temptation of something such as that when you practically have it at your fingertips with your phone or what other device you may have?
Today, God has cleansed me from that. Yeah. I don't even have the desire. He's taken the desire away. So not only in that, I'm careful of everything that I watch, even movies or just anything, so the enemy can't use that to trigger me and try to pull me back to that. So
you handle that, you overcome that. Once you've overcome that, you handle like any other addiction. You just make sure you put up boundaries and you don't cross those boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he can't use that as a stronghold in my life anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought that was very interesting when you pointed that out in the book because it is something that our society does not talk about. We assume that it's only men that are affected by this and not women. So I guess to any man or woman, how did you overcome it and what would you say to them?
I would say that, like you said, it is just a distraction from the enemy, and you waste a lot of time indulging in that when that's not the way that God sees sex and the way he created it between a man and a wife. It shines a negative light on everything that he set forth for us to follow. Right. So the best thing to do is just put it away and not do it.
So I want to help someone, though, who may be struggling. How did you get to this point to where you can be so strong to resist that temptation? I
wanted to go higher in him. I wanted to be able to hear him, and I knew I couldn't live in sin actively with that in my life and then say, God, I surrender all. Yeah. So I had to surrender all and really pray and ask for him to take that away from me. Okay. So it wasn't that you had to go to counseling or something of that nature. It was once you came to know Christ as your Lord and Savior, you were able to then get in your word and then once I matured in him, I was able to get rid of it. Okay. And it does affect a lot of marriages. A lot of men or women watch it and they fantasize about what their partner should or should not be doing, but it's fantasy. It's not real. Right. So it plagues marriages. It destroys families. And a lot of parents don't know that their children are watching it. My mom had no idea that I was watching or exposed to pornography at 9 years old. I mean, you just unpacked so much in this book. I mean, we could spend 2 days talking about all the many things you unpack in this book. One of the things that you also talk about is you talk about domestic violence and the abuse that you suffered at the hands of your husband for over 10 years, who also happened to be a minister. I want to talk to you more about that when we come back. Okay. More with Nikki Alexander when we come back. Stay with us.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Welcome back. We've been talking with author Nikki Alexander. We're talking with her about her latest book, What the Devil Meant for Bad, God Used for My Good. Nikki, you're very open and transparent in this book, and you talk about a number of things. One of the things you talk about is domestic violence and the abuse that you suffered for over 10 years at the hands of your husband, who was also, I said minister, but really a pastor. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a difference between a minister and a pastor leading a congregation. Let's talk about that. First of all, I mean, how did you guys come to meet, and how did you develop later into a marriage?
We didn't date long before we got married, which was probably one of the first problems, but we met at Optel. We worked together. Okay. I was in the cable department, he was in the telephone department, mm-hmm. and a friend of his introduced us to one another.
How long did you guys date before you got married?
Some months, like 6-7 months.
Okay. Yeah.
So not very long.
And you give us detail in the book, and you talk about the fact that you guys were dating and everything's going well in the dating relationship, and then all of a sudden, due to a hardship on his family side, you guys then have to later move in sooner than you probably would have wanted to move in together, but you did. Unpack that a little bit more.
I had my own apartment, and his mom and dad went through a foreclosure, and he ended up moving in with me, and they moved into another relative's house. Yeah. And it began from there. We were actually hiding the wedding from his dad, who was our pastor, because his mom didn't want him to know that we were engaged. Yeah. But she was helping us plan it behind the scenes.
Man.
Yeah.
So deceptive acts going on all along at that point.
From the beginning.
So later you guys, okay, you're dating, you're married, now you're married, you also have a child. Mm-hmm. The relationship then develops into not just verbal abuse, but then into physical abuse.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
I had my son by him probably I was pregnant at the wedding and didn't know it. Yeah. So my son was born September 25th, 2001. We got married February 3rd, 2001.
Okay.
And after my son was born, we had actually built our first house and moved into it briefly because I found out he was spending all the money for the bills on going to the strip club and just whatever he wanted to buy outside of taking care of the home. And both of us were very young, getting married, 21 and 22, so I wasn't perfect. My mouth was a force to be reckoned with, but he was very immature. So if I cried, he would mock me. And I guess one day he got so mad at me because I wouldn't talk to him to keep the escalated argument from happening, because I already knew where it was going to go. Right. So I refused to talk, and he decided he was going to force me to talk. So I was in my daughter's room, and he drugged me off her bed and threw me down on the floor and got on top of me. And he began to choke me and curse me and tell me, "You gonna talk to me today?" Yeah. You know, and I started laughing at him. So that's how hateful I was, but I started laughing. And he took his fist and hit me in my forehead. Man. Yeah. And that was one of the biggest moments in the very beginning where it really, really got bad. Yeah.
So I guess, how many times did you convince yourself that this is probably not going to happen again? That was a one-time incident. It's not going to happen because, I mean, I guess you guys continued in this marriage for 10 years.
Yeah.
How many times would you say you convinced yourself that it would never happen again?
Countless times. Yeah. And it wasn't so much that I was convincing myself that it wasn't going to happen again, more so than it was I felt like I was stuck and didn't have anybody to turn to or anywhere to go. My family, as we discussed in the beginning, I didn't have a real relationship with my dad or my mom, so my mom had actually put me out when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter at 19, so I was homeless and pregnant, so I knew I couldn't go back to live with her. Yes. And I had never lived with my dad, and I didn't want to burden my grandmother, so I felt stuck, really. Man,
so you had to stay there because now you have, at this point, is it 2 children?
Yes.
So you feel like you have to stay in this marriage, although it's abusive, you have nowhere else to go.
Right.
Man. Did you guys, I guess you do talk about in the book, number of times you guys sought counseling.
Yes.
Did that, I mean, I guess it never proved to really be effective.
No.
And why do you think it was not effective for you all?
Because I think he had already made up in his mind that I think he got married to impress his dad because his dad was the pastor. He wanted to follow kind of in his footsteps. But he still wanted that single life. He would always come home bragging about the other truck drivers or his friends who lived a single life and what they get to do and what, it's kind of like he was living vicariously through them.
Yes.
But you're married and you
Right.
have this household and these children and we need to, take care of that. So my message was always correct. I wanted to work on the marriage. I read books by Joyce Meyer, whoever I could get my hands on, but my method wasn't always correct because I
Okay.
would tear him down verbally. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the final straw that led you to say, you know what, enough of this? After 10 years being abused, because you go through a number of incidents in the book that talk about verbal abuse and physical abuse, what was that final straw that said, that's it, I'm out?
We had actually separated for a period of time, and I ended up having an affair, is what happened. In the very end, the counselor told him, women don't typically cheat on their husbands. He said, you pushed her out there in the field and left her for anybody to come along and take her away from you. And so after that incident with my affair, we tried to reconcile for like a year. And in that reconciliation, we were going to counseling, and he decided to divulge all this information to me. And he shared that he had slept with my stepmother, my dad's wife.
Man.
That was the straw for me.
Yeah.
Because in my psyche, I had already been molested. How can I be physically attracted to or active with someone who has had sex with someone that my dad has had sex with? It was just too much for me. And at that point, that's when I told him, I don't even want to try anymore.
Yeah.
So
you guys did finally divorce.
Yes.
You have since moved on with your life.
Yes.
You are now happily married.
Yes.
In a very healthy relationship. I want to talk more about that when we come back.
Okay.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. We're talking with Nikki Alexander, author of the book, What the Devil Meant for Bad, God Used for My Good. Nikki, God has indeed used your bad for his glory and your good. Let's talk about, you're happily married now.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
I have been happily married for almost 3 years now, come May 4th.
Amen.
My husband and I actually grew up together, but we went our separate ways. He was gone for like 12 years before I actually saw him again. And I had a crush on him when I was little, but he was 16 and I was 10.
Okay.
But he just happened to be here from work on R&R from Afghanistan. And my sister called me and she said, everybody's going out to eat before he goes back. And I was actually dating somebody at the time because I was already divorced.
Yes.
And he had actually brought a date to this dinner that we all went to. And we were just having conversation, and he was telling me how he had been asking my mom and my sisters about me over the years, and just kept asking. He said, I don't know why, I was just always inquisitive or concerned about where you were and what you were doing. And we ended up exchanging phone numbers because the guy that I was actually talking to, we were actually getting ready to break up anyway because I found out he was cheating on me.
Oh, man.
And he actually had the nerve to say to me, well, you put up with it in your marriage for 10 years. So he actually thought I was going to be like, well, okay. Well,
okay,
no.
so
That's
now I'm
all
going to
the
put
more
up with it from
reason
you?
why, I have to tell you bye.
Right.
But, my husband and I started talking like 8 hours a day from Afghanistan to here. We were talking. And just ever since that time, we just clicked.
I just got what you said. 8 hours a day?
8
8 hours straight?
Yes.
That's a day's work.
Verizon phone bill was $2,500.
Whoa.
So
okay.
we just clicked, and he's trustworthy.
Yes.
He's everything that God could have brought.
Everything
in
you
my
should
life.
have in a marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So otherwise, how could I trust him working 8,000 miles away
that's
if
true.
I didn't trust him? But he's loving, funny.
Yeah.
So, and he loves my children like they're his own.
Man.
So.
And you guys have 4 children.
Yes.
Okay.
He actually has 4, and I have 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
So that's good. So you went through a very tough period there, a very difficult marriage, but now you're on the other side of this.
Yes.
Now you know everything that you want in a relationship, being older, first of all, because you got married at a young age earlier before. Now being older and knowing exactly what you want in a relationship, you're getting that.
Yes.
So let's talk about this. The book is doing quite well. I mean, you've got things lined up, other talk show opportunities and things lined up. Let's talk about what's next for Nikki Alexander.
My dream is to, of course, do a movie on the book, but also a television show where you have people coming forth talking about their molestation or addressing domestic violence and actually getting healing from it, even if it comes to them meeting with the person who harmed them. And telling them they forgive them. Because that's what I've always wanted to do to the man who molested me.
Yeah, and you talk about that in the book and the fact that you didn't get the opportunity because you couldn't find his contact information, but you did search out for him.
Yes.
And it was really just to go and let him know that you had forgiven him. Yeah, yes. I mean, that's very courageous, and certainly I commend you for that. I guess the question would be, what would you say to some man or some woman who has been abused in some way? What's your message to them?
In my life now, because I've been through so much stress and so much turmoil, I require peace. So if you're in a situation that you know is not healthy for you and more importantly your children, I would say get out of that situation. Because if a man or woman is controlling in any way or abusive verbally and especially physically, that's not something that you want to endure every day.
Man.
And the effect and impact that it had on my children is what hurts me the most, that I didn't leave prior.
And it may very well be the same thing, but I guess the final question was going to be, what is the one thing you hope readers will take away from the book?
That if God brought me through it, he can bring you through it as well.
Man.
Because I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I held on to my hope because I believe in my Savior, Jesus Christ. But there were some days where I just was out of gas and didn't know what else to do and who to turn to. And when you don't have someone to talk to about it, it makes it even harder. And I held it all in for so many years. But you just have to cling to that hope and push forward. Just pray your way through it.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
This is an awesome book. Get your hands on it. We're going to share her website information with you there at the bottom of the screen. And if you have been abused in some way, we're going to share some contact information for some agencies nationally as well as locally here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And if you're a perpetrator in some way, you too can get some help. Get the help that you need so you're no longer abusing. So thanks again for watching. It's been a great show. We'll see you next week.